whole point behind these is to, I think it's really easy for people that are struggling to look at people that have had some degrees of success and be like, you've had all the breaks, or you've had the money, or you're an overnight success. Like, they don't see the struggle that really goes into it. And I think by sharing our stories and we've all got struggles, we've all got obstacles to overcome. It makes it relatable, and those people that are going through tough times can actually see that, hey, like, they did it, he did it, maybe I can do it too. Got Derek Woodske on. Derek, thanks for coming on.
I appreciate you having me. It's definitely an interesting thing. The story itself can be as long or as short as I need to make it. It's one of those situations where, for me, because I pursued athletics from British Columbia, I didn't really have a lot of the opportunities that most people in my sport would have had, even within Canada. And if you go back to the mid 1990s, when I if you weren't from one of the big centers like Vancouver, Calgary, Winnipeg, Toronto, etc., typically you didn't see a lot of the athletic opportunities that those kids or those students would have had.
Sure.
So I learned very, very early on. I sort of started to manifest this idea within myself that if I was going to move outside of the confines of a logging town of 200 people, I really was going to have to overcome was myself, for lack of a better understanding. And to do that, I'll be quite honest, and I've spoken about it a little bit, I had to start creating almost a false sense of reality, because what I was trying to do had never been done before. And, so when we talk about setbacks and adversities, right from the very beginning, I was in a situation that hadn't been achieved. No one from my town, from that community, or from that valley had ever done what I was thinking about trying to do. It didn't exist. And we knew that it existed in the world. We knew that other people had gone on to be athletes or whatever, but not in my sport, not where I was from.
Yeah.
And so we did our best to try to surround ourselves with people that would come in and out of our lives that would have a bit of information here or a bit of information there. And that just started to put me on this path of trying to learn as much as I could so that I could try to achieve this goal. And when I graduated high school, at the time, the greatest opportunity I had as an athlete was to train in a track club in another small town in BC, but at least it was like one incremental step higher than where I'd been,
Yeah.
And so I went, and I thought that was the big time, right? Like, that's what I had to do. And at the end of the day, when I look back, it was still so far down on the rung that it wasn't big time. But what that did is it introduced me to some people that had gone to the United States on scholarships, that had done it, had experienced it, and they knew who to call, or at the very least gave me an idea of where to look.
Yeah.
And so I used those opportunities to get in touch with some people. And when I got to the United States for sports, it was a very small school. It was a very unique opportunity. And the way I describe it when I really take the time to tell it is, I was put into the perfect situation at the perfect time. I had a young coach who was a high school teacher who would eventually go on to be the 2008 U.S. Olympic coach, but he didn't know that.
Yeah.
This is way back in his life. So I was put into his life, and I was put in as this kid that was so driven because of where he had come from that because I'd already super exceeded expectation at that point.
Yeah.
So for me, it was just I couldn't train hard enough. I couldn't train more because I figured I was already at such a disadvantage from where I started that I must have this entire world that I need to catch up on. And I kept pursuing that until I eventually had a lot of success in track and field. But with success, I also had a huge amount of setback. In 2000, between a surgery on my right foot and I've had surgery on both my feet, a surgery on my left foot and a surgery on my right knee, I ended up being so damaged from training that I took a year to have to learn how to walk again in 2000.
Wow.
And it was tough because I literally in the U.S. college system, and they were starting to talk about Olympic hopeful and all these things and all these positives were coming into light. And then I got hurt, and I got hurt really bad. And
how old were you at the time, Derek?
Go ahead.
How old were you?
I was a little bit older, but I was still only 22. So, I was your typical junior in college, age-wise, and and basically it literally was one of those situations where in like 30 seconds, everything just ends,
Yeah.
And you can equate it to a death or a loss because in a sense it is, where something that had been is gone and is going to be replaced with either nothing or something that is completely different than what it was.
Absolutely.
And for me, it was replaced with something that was going to be forever different.
Yeah, and that could be devastating to so many people. Like, how do you pick yourself up from that?
It was a weird time. For the first 10 weeks, I sort of had some time to just be inside my own head because for the first 10 weeks I was in a hip cast, so there was no rehab, there's nothing that involved interaction with anybody.
It's all mental.
So
it's all mental.
Just had to wait. I had to sit around and wait. But it was funny because during that period of time, and the best way I can describe it is that same fantasy creating side of my personality that existed when I was a kid, where I would see myself as a much greater success level than I was in that little town of Parson. Like when I was training, I was in my mind, I was always this great success. I was doing great things.
Yep.
When I was training, I was in a fantasy all the time.
That's the right brain, brother.
Yes, right? And it's like the kids playing catch in the backyard, but they're actually
in the World Series.
Playing, they're in the Super Bowl in the backyard, right? One's a wide receiver and one's a quarterback that day. And it was that same mentality. Well, I realized it was going to be that same type of thinking that was going to get me through it. And what I ended up doing is I started to really create this idea in my head that I was going to come back from this injury and I was going to have success again. And after I had success, I don't know if I was ever going to make the national team. I didn't know if I was ever going to go beyond that level. I didn't even know if I'd compete in college again. So I just started to think of myself as the guy that was going to come back from the injury and win again. Because there was no way to know what I was. And it did. It took about 14 months to be able to run at about 70% because I'd lost so much function in the knee.
Yeah.
And but I kept moving, and in my mind, I just kept believing that I was going to win again and win again. And 13 months after my surgery, I competed at the indoor national championships in the U.S. collegiate system, and I snuck into 8th place. 13 months later, what that 8th place represented was actually the status of All-American. Now, I'd been All-American previous at the other university, and I'd been a national champion previous, but this was a higher level of competition. So to get in and get that All-American status at Division I was like, okay.
I can do this.
I can do this.
Yeah.
And I sort of got to a crossroads at that point where I was like, is this enough? Like to come back from this injury and be All-American?
Yeah.
You know, was this enough? Maybe this is it. A lot of guys train 4 years and can't be an All-American.
Yeah.
Right? And I was able to do it coming off this injury. And I remember taking off my knee brace after the competition, and there was an American shot putter named Christian Cantwell, who's been on a number of Olympic teams, was sitting on the field, and he had competed as well. And I had actually edged him out a little bit that day. And he's looking at me, and he's looking at my knee, and he just shakes his head. And I'm like, yeah, it is that bad. It was that bad.
Wow.
I took a job coaching at a university in Michigan. And people talk about the struggles, right, of coaching and PT and making money in business.
Yeah.
And I tell people, I'm like, my first job that I took as a coach, and I didn't know if I was still going to be an athlete or not, so I was thinking, well, maybe I'm just going to become a coach. I made less than $1,000 a month working 40 hours a week for a year.
Wow.
Right? Like, just invested in these athletes. Like, just, that's who I was. I was a college coach, writing programs, coaching athletes.
So you
had
had
like $550 a month rent out of that, you know, living in a cement box in like Whitaker, Michigan, or wherever the hell it was. And I decided that I was going to start rehabbing my body on my own, because the collegiate system was done, and the protection of all the good therapy I'd had is gone.
Wow.
And I just started doing it. And over the course of that year, I just sort of bumped along athletically. And the next thing I knew, I was sitting number 2 in Canada. And I was like, well, what do I do? You know, I'm only making $12,000 a year. I'm actually not even making enough to pay taxes. You know, it's like, I'm coaching. Like, what do I do? And at that time, I had an opportunity to go train with Judd Logan in Ashland, so I gave up my job, became a volunteer assistant coach for no money. My parents helped me out a little bit with rent, and I just started training.
Wow.
And training very, very hard that year. And that year, I moved within striking distance of the Canadian national record. Within 2 years, I broke the Canadian national record, and I made Team Canada with the Commonwealth team. And it just, that opened up a lot of other opportunities where financially I couldn't see it coming right away.
Yeah. But
it just put me on a path of interaction with people that, yeah, you know, it's taken a long time. We're talking, it's going on almost 12 years since I moved to Ashland, you know, and trained with Judd. I mean, this has been a very long process. A lot of really long hours spent for very little in return.
Yeah, a lot of hurdles.
Yeah, so I've had a very tumultuous path to get to where I'm at now, and by no means is the path going to be any less tumultuous in the future.
Yeah.
It's just going to change, and I got more life experience to be able to deal with those changes.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I think your story brings about two things, and we're probably getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but that first step that you took, and you know, the way back when, just getting out of your hometown and things that hadn't been done before, like, I think that's such an important key, is so many people try to think of a big picture and like try to plan everything out, and you know, how am I going to get there and who am I going to meet, and just take the first step. And that's what you did, and then, you know, it opened up so many doors, and you met the right coaches and the right people and the right network. So that, and then the mindset after your injury, because I mean, so many people go down the other road, and it's like, woe is me, and this sucks, and then they follow that. Like, if you had done that, if you had not used if you had, I guess, used the logical part of your brain, the left side, and looked at where you were at that point in time, and you may never have came back to run again, let alone accomplish what you did. So you know, maybe you want to speak to those 2 points, like, because I think those are two keys to your story.
And Mr. Ellingham was a clever guy, but he used to refer to small town life in Canada in particular is the Peter Pan syndrome, and the idea that nobody ever wanted to leave home. You know, it's too fearful. There's too much sense of abandonment and loss of connection. Yeah. And for sure, I felt the same things. You know, and it was oddly enough out of tragedy that spawned my ability to separate from that. And it wasn't a tragedy that affected my family specifically, but in those small communities far away from home, to be able to get home fast enough if something went wrong. Yeah. Right? Yeah. That was a big motivating factor for me. And it was, you know, I made very small steps in the beginning because of it. And it's a very harsh way to think about it, but what happened to me was a friend's brother, all within the same age group, died in an accident. And what it made me do is I sat back, and it was really like an eye-opener for me, because I realized it didn't matter if I was in Perth, Australia, or sitting across the street in the cafe, nothing would have changed that accident. Yeah. There was nothing that was going to, I couldn't do anything about it. There was nothing that I was going to do or could have done that was going to change that event in that logging road that day. And I realized at that moment that a lot of what my apprehension was related to was the fear in itself of the unknown, and the fear that my responsibilities or my connection, I couldn't do something today because I do travel so much and I always have that sense of disconnection. But I had to come to the realization that everybody, in a sense, is put on the earth to live their life to the best of their ability. Yeah. How you can interact with others and how you bring them in and out of your life is a part of that. But my family's very close. My brother and I are very, very close, and my parents. So I'm very fortunate that way. But I realized that my dad's life was his life. My brother's life is his life. I can't live that for either of them. No. So as much as I would love to be in the same town with my brother all the time, doing stuff with him every day,
you gotta live your life.
Do his thing, right? He's got to do his thing.
Yeah.
And I got to do mine.
And, 100%. I agree with you 1,000%.
Times. But that's in my opinion, the biggest limiting factor in small town Canada is realizing that sometimes you have to go out and just let the opportunity for an individual existence take priority. And it's not a selfishness like I used to think it was. I thought I used to be very selfish for leaving. But now I look back and it has nothing to do with being selfish. It has everything to do with taking my family name and trying to live it to the best of my ability.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, and being a good person. So the son that my parents raised gets to interact with all these people all over the world, and in a sense, their name and reputation is, you know, sort of judged through my actions.
Well, and how much are you influencing the lives of others by doing what you're doing versus staying in that town?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I don't think that's just a small town thing. I think so many people live on the external and live, you know, like care too much almost what other people think. And then it becomes, well, you know, they need me to work overtime and they need me to do this and my parents want me to go to school for this. And it's like, if you don't live your own life, if you're not happy for yourself, you're going to be useless to like, you're not going to be able to do anything for anybody. So
for anybody. There's a strength coach in Rhode Island. His name's John Moore, but he's a really clever guy. Yeah. And he made this comment yesterday. I was working out and we're just talking, and it was just very briefly in a different tangent. He had made an observation of the guys that are in the industry right now that don't even work as personal trainers. They're just gym going guys, but they don't really take care of themselves, but they're using so much gear and so much other stuff to get massive that they're becoming extremely unhealthy, and they're not a very functional human being.
Mm-hmm.
So their life has external appearance.
Yeah.
You know. So 100, and the women are the same. 100% of who they are is that most superficial layer of personal perception.
Yeah.
And he makes the comment, and then he sits there for a second, because he's also a very deep thinker and spiritual, and he goes, you know, you're almost guaranteed that they're going to be doing this life over.
Yeah.
Because they just realized it. And I was like, you know what, he's right. It is that. There's no outward connection to anyone or anything.
Yeah.
You know, it's no different than the person that never leaves shore, right? And it's like, if you wait for the calmest seas to set sail, you're not going to have a lot of luck.
No, it's not. It's not what life's about.
No,
sure.
You can always go home. That's what my dad always told me.
Huh.
My dad said to me when I was very young, he goes, you can always come home.
Huh.
He goes, but you have to go away and see what's out there.
Yeah.
I would probably say the lack of consistent connection to high quality people.
Yeah.
And it's a bit twofold. One, there's a lot of douchebags in the industry in terms of very selfish, 1% external gratification people.
Sure.
Very few people want to know who you are. They just care about what they look like and whether or not you acknowledge it.
Yeah.
That part of it, I don't like at all. I like my goal, for example, to be sub 10% is 100% based on, like I'm realizing now as I get close to 40, getting lean is important because it's going to help me live a better life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a different psychology.
Yeah, than when you're 20 for sure.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like everybody goes through a stage. Like when I was a young athlete, man, I was a bit random. There was times where I was probably very difficult to be around if you didn't know me well. So I'm not going to say I'm not guilty of some of those characteristics. Everybody is.
For sure.
But that for me is probably the most difficult thing, because even when I think back to when I was the most, self-centered, driven athlete in phases where I was trying to achieve a goal, I still believed that everybody had something to share. It may not have always been the information that you could use, but man, everybody's got a story.
Yeah.
And I really have a hard time with people that can't take time to listen to somebody's story.
Yeah, I agree.
I hate that.
I agree.
Because that story could change their life.
Absolutely.
And then the other part, which is connected to that, but from the other perspective, for me, for sure, is it's the lack of consistent connection when you do meet interested people. Men or women, relationship, not relationship, sexual energy, not sexual energy, it has nothing to do with that. It's like, it's just this rawness to a human where when you look into their eyes when they're talking to you, you're like, this person has something to say.
Yeah.
And you know that you're only going to get exposed to it for maybe 2 days out of the next 3 years.
Yeah.
And you're just like, and you take it away, like you're thankful for that time, but you're just like, fuck, I travel so much. Like, man, I wish I could just be somewhere long enough to actually hear all this person's information.
Yeah.
You meet somebody, or you are in a situation that is going to like permanently imprint itself on you for the rest of your life. And that used to happen to me a little bit, but when I started traveling and meeting thousands of people, it started happening a lot.
Can you give an example?
Or I would be like having coffee on a street in this city on the other side of the planet, and it was like there was a moment of clarity occurs where it's like your mind and your whatever you want to refer to it as, depending on your belief system, but like a soul or a spirit, it all sort of lines back up, and it's like you have the realization that I don't know how I got here, but I am on the other side of the planet in this moment with this person or with these people, and it's very awakening.
Yeah.
Because I don't think you get to experience that very much, and I don't know if we are supposed to get to experience that a lot. And I think there's something to it because it's a weird experience, like when you are aware that you're aware. of
Yeah.
being somewhere else with a completely different culture of people.
Mm-hmm.
It's very strange, and to me, I think that's the best part. Like, more so than, and I love when I'm lecturing, and I have that moment where I can tell that presenting information, and that in that moment, the same need that I had as an athlete to win is being achieved now by sharing a huge amount of my experience with other people.
Mm.
And it's the same self-gratifying, ego side of myself that is being fulfilled, but it's a much more enjoyable sensation knowing that it's not just to, the moment of winning, but it's like I'm getting that same experience by giving something away.
Yeah, helping others.
And that's probably, I would say, the most personally satisfying.
Yeah, that's pretty profound, and that's I think that's the one thing that I'm really learning on this journey is the more you can give back and really help others. Like I think that's why we've all been put here. To be honest with you, is the more you can enrich another person's life and other people's life, and the more we can help them achieve their goals or get through their struggles. That's the stuff that makes me feel pretty good. So I see it 100%.
Sure. It's helping someone achieve a physical transformation in life, if you do it correctly, is going to be a complete transformation of self.
Yeah.
And too many people right now in this industry, all they're focused on is shedding 3% in an X number of days, and
so they can go away.
Yeah, and you know what happens is they may push for that goal and they may achieve it, but it seems like it always leaves the client empty.
Yeah.
And some sort of void in the relationship between the client and the coach. It's like they both gave away so much,